Dave, welcome to Legacy and Leadership. I'm really excited for today's conversation. Our guest today represents something that sits at the heart of this series, the idea that leadership is not only about professional success, but also about curiosity, service, mentorship, and investing in the future of others. For those of you listening, I'm Dane Walkington. Today I'm joined by Dave Adam, a 1987 graduate of UW-Whitewater, retired Senior Vice President of Finance and Treasurer at Johnson Financial Group, Vice Chair of the UW-Whitewater Foundation Board, a mentor, a philanthropist, and a lifelong advocate for both education and conservation. Dave, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get started from the beginning. When you think back at your time at UW-Whitewater, what originally brought you here, and what stands out most when you reflect on those college years?
Well, Dane, I'd like to say that I put a lot of research in with extensive spreadsheet analysis in my process of getting to Whitewater, but this was before VisiCalc. And the real truth is that my Whitewater decision was based on a chance conversation. I was in a physics class in my junior year of high school, and a really smart girl on the table behind me asked me where I was going to college and what I was going to study. And I was surprised she even talked to me. So I was kind of taken back, and I just said, well, I think I'm going to study business. And without a pause, she said, well, you're going to Whitewater then. And wanting to sound really smart, I said, yeah, that's what I'm going to be
Mhm.
doing. And that kind of put me on the track to Whitewater, believe it or not.
Great. Oh, I love that. Was there a professor, a mentor, or experience specifically during your time as a student that helped influence your direction early on?
Well, I would say, on balance, the openness of the professors and the genuine focus on student success most stands out with me. I grew up about an hour north of Whitewater in a small town called Columbus, Wisconsin, where my graduating class was about 130. And if I didn't understand something in high school, I just went to the teacher and they would help me out. So when I came to Whitewater, I had that same level of interaction and assistance. And one story sticks in mind, and that was I had an accounting professor named Norm Zelton who had the intermediate one and two weeder out classes in accounting, and he terrified many of us. Not in a bad way, but in a way that challenged you to be your best. And I remember several office visits where he'd spend like half an hour or more with just me explaining some arcane accounting pronouncement until it stuck in my head. And my sons, who went to UW-Madison and Marquette, likely didn't have that sort of attention with a professor, especially not in a 200 level course.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. So you earned your degree in accounting. You went on to build a successful career in finance and leadership with Johnson Financial Group. Can you walk us through that professional journey and how did the experiences at Whitewater help prepare you for that path?
Sure. Well, it was a very good job market for accounting grads in 1987. I had taken a semester off of school to intern on the East Coast with the accounting firm Arthur Young, which is now EY. While the experience looked great on paper, I realized I didn't want a public accounting career from the get-go. I had this notion of wanting to create value, not attest to it. And since I like finance, I went straight into banking. Now, some of my classmates thought I was bonkers for not going down the high life of public accounting, but in the end, many of them took 2 to 5 years on that path and found what suited them, and they went into their own preferred industry. Having had the internship awareness, I guess you could say I skipped that stage. And I spent like 35 years in community banking at three great institutions, working with some wonderful teams. I used the confidence gained with my Whitewater education, interactions with the staff and fellow students to do what might be seen as some non-traditional things. So I managed technology at my second bank job, not always very well, but we did some innovative things as computers entered the workforce. I still have a 40-pound Compact 2 laptop in my attic that I might give to one of my grandkids someday. After that bank was sold, I shifted to Johnson Financial and worked part-time for about 8 years while our two sons were little, and I coached all their teams until they said, Dad, thank you, but no thank you. You don't need to be around me anymore. And I backed off and went back into work full-time. And ended up being treasurer for the JFG for the last dozen years or so, and I got to do a lot of interesting things. And I consider myself really fortunate to have had the experiences of both Whitewater and at my employers to enable me to take kind of a non-traditional path of not working 60 hours a week for my entire career. And that gave me more options that allowed me to, I think, have a broader and diverse sense or set of interests that I could then carry with me into my retirement.
Oh, I love hearing about your professional career and the journey that you took, and obviously very impressive working for those particular firms, and we're still involved with them today. So I love hearing that. One thing that stands out about your story is that your interest extends well beyond finance. You're deeply involved in conservation, archaeology, travel, and nonprofit leadership, and you've traveled to more than 70 countries in every continent. Where does that curiosity and sense of exploration come from?
Can I put a plug in for another UW school, or are you going to beep that out on
No,
me?
you definitely can.
You sure?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'm going to put in a plug for UW Platteville here. And when I was going to school, there was no foreign studies program at Whitewater. So I give credit to my mom for giving me the appreciation for probably adventurous travel because when I was about 14, I told my parents I was sick of going to vacation at a cottage somewhere and just fishing all week. And she goes, well, if you don't like it, do something about it. And she took me to Beaver Dam where they had a AAA office. And she said, here, have some books and you plan a vacation for the family. And so I took all that stuff home and ended up planning a vacation to the Black Hills. Went back to Beaver Dam and they laid out a triptych for me. I probably lost about half the readership here because triptych won't be understood by anybody under the age of 50. But they orange highlighted a little path for us to take out to the Black Hills and back. And I like that experience so much that when I got to college, I knew I wanted to try to get out beyond the Midwest. And UW Platteville had a foreign studies program in London at the time. So I took that and I had the pleasure of taking classes that were 15 credits worth that transferred back to Whitewater. But classes were from Monday at 11 a.m. to Wednesday at 2 p.m. So I had pretty much 4-day weekends. And I go off with friends all over the Europe area. And I probably spent more time in the British Museum than I did in my studies. And that museum, for those of you who don't know, is a huge collection of culture from around the world, much of it expropriated in a probably not the best way. But it was a great, concise area to see a lot about the world. And with that in mind, I just got a love for wanderlust. And when my wife Kathy and I did our honeymoon, she agreed to go backpacking around Europe with me, and I've been able to kind of keep that sense of adventure ever since then.
Oh, that's great. I love hearing all the stories and the travels. You recently got back from Ireland. I'm excited to hear a little bit more about that travel and the biking that you've done as well. It's always very impressive to hear that. And I think that anytime that you're plugging UW system school, it's a good thing, that's for sure. So how have these travels and experiences that you've had influenced the way that you think about specific relationships and community involvement?
I'm going to put in a plug for a British politician, but I think it was Winston Churchill who said, you make a living by what you get, and you make a life by what you give. And travel, my work with archaeology and conservation, the mentoring I do here at Whitewater and my nonprofit service all remind me how fortunate I am to be born in the U.S. when I was. Had the family support and upbringing that I had, a supportive wife, and generally very good employers and good health. So life to me isn't always about consumption. It's compassion and concern for others, coupled with a curiosity to experience the more nuanced elements of life. So it's seeking to live out kind of what Churchill quote, what came up with. So
That's great. Thank you. So now, even after retirement, you remain incredibly engaged with UW Whitewater through the foundation board and the mentorship of students here at Whitewater. Why has it been important to you to stay involved with the university, and what has kept your connection with Whitewater so strong over the years?
um, I would say my Whitewater experience gave me the education to be employable, probably the confidence to step outside customary boundaries, take some measured risks. And I met my future wife at the school the last semester. So, all in all, I would say those are three of the biggest gifts that I've been given in my life. So, it seemed like a no brainer to pay it back in that way. Our family's also fortunate that we have a second home just south of Whitewater on Whitewater Lake and a conservancy just north of Whitewater. So I'm in the area about half the time now, and much of my board service outside of Whitewater revolves around Madison. So I like the small town feel, but it's also got some big town amenities with the university, including the arts and so forth. And the parks and the whole recreation of the South Kettle is an awesome area to be hanging out in.
I agree. Well, we definitely appreciate your time that you volunteer on our foundation board. We have such a strong board, and it's definitely been a privilege to be able to meet strong alums that are passionate and give back their time on our board. So thank you again. So in 2017, you and your wife Kathy, also a proud UW Whitewater alum, established the Adam Endowed Scholarship supporting both accounting students some of the years and then ecology students in the others. What inspired you to create a scholarship that reflects both your professional background and your passion for conservation?
I like the school's commitment to young adults, particularly those of the first-gen college students, which I think, as John Buckley noted in your first podcast, make up about 40% of our undergrad population. When people ask me the question you just did, Dane, I like to tell a story about a young man whose name was Dwayne, who was an environmental sciences major at Whitewater, who worked on my conservancy about 3 miles north of campus. Dwayne did a several-month project using metal traps where he placed in our prairie these traps to see the composition of creatures that he would catch before and after we had a prescribed burn. So each morning, Dwayne would check the traps and let out any animals before the heat of the sun cooked those creatures. He did this every day for several months. And when his project was over, his professor invited me to see the poster board that he created off of this. So he invited Dwayne, and he came out in the car to our conservancy, and Dwayne was kind of nervous. And he put up this poster board, started talking about it. And he said something like, well, I walked out to your property in the morning to check the traps every day. And I stopped him and I said, so you walk 3 miles each way every day for a few months? And he said, yes. And I said, no car? And he said, no. I said, no bike? He said, no, I don't own a bike either. Well, it turns out Dwayne was all in on passion, but as a first-gen college student, lacking the funds to buy the sorts of conveniences that most of us are used to. He had to kind of do this on his own. And that level of commitment to me is astounding. And it turned out that Dwayne went on and he got his master's, I think, somewhere in the Gulf Coast working with dolphins. And he probably has a very productive career right now. But if my wife and I, through our scholarship that we're giving, which is small in the grand scheme of things, can influence, say, half dozen Dwaynes, that's a life pretty well lived.
Yes, sir. No, that's such a great story. I love when you shared that with me on Founders Day. I was just so impressed that a student would take the time to walk that far and have the passion to do what he did and now has followed in his career path and still doing it. I definitely feel that though you say it was little, I feel that you do make a strong impact on students here with your guys' scholarship. So thank you. A little in line with that, you're also known for staying personally engaged with students, mentoring them, creating opportunities for meaningful conversations. Can you talk a bit more about these opportunities and why mentorship has become such an important part of your involvement here at UW Whitewater?
Sure. Yeah, it's one of my favorite hobbies in the Whitewater area to be able to be involved with these young adults. So I started mentoring 1 or 2 Whitewater students a year when I was still working full time and didn't really have a lot of time to commit more. But now that I've retired, I probably mentor 4 or 5 students at a time. And one of the things that seems to impress these young adults with our interactions is, one, they get free food. But then two, it's not my intelligence because I'm not long in that category, but rather the sorts of things that I've done outside of work while still having a rewarding enough career. But today's students, I think, are so much smarter than I was at their age. But I think that they feel more pressure than I did of needing to succeed in a tougher job market with so many things coming at them, whether it's artificial intelligence or the uncertainty of changing skill sets and so forth. And trying to give them perspective and balance is one of the things I try to offer, along with sharing some of my mistakes that I made along the way. Certainly were enough of those. And when they kind of realize that I was able to succeed while also still having some uncertainties and made mistakes along the way, I think they're just more comforted by that, and it gives them more confidence. So I would say volunteering is probably one of my highest ROTs, or return on time. I get back in energy, enthusiasm, and ideas more than I give in experiences, and it's a great use of my time. And I would encourage any alum out there who wants to dip their toes into giving back to the university to seek out a possible mentorship. And it doesn't need to be a huge commitment of time, Oftentimes it can be just an hour a month or two, and you'll be surprised how much it gives back to you.
Yeah, I love hearing stories of our foundation board and alums that participate in our mentorship program and the interactions and the impact that they make with the mentees that they have. I think is speaks volumes of everything that our foundation board does. And I guess there's a time to plug a little bit of our campaign that we have going on here and the affinity groups that we're establishing within those affinity groups for our alums. There's mentorship opportunities, so hopefully we can get some more alums involved in that and make an impact in the students' lives that we have. So of those students that you mentor, what would you say impresses you the most about them?
Well, I'm probably getting some of the more motivated students because they have to go through a process to apply to become a mentor, and they generally show up on time, which is a good thing. Um, but the conveyed intelligence that they've given me is just super impressive. As I mentioned earlier, I was not that smart when I was their age. But the thing I think that impresses me even more is their sense of altruism. So, uh, how they fit in this world and their appreciation of those less fortunate than them. An example here is a program that I work with tangentially, which is the Enactus program on campus that develops projects in communities and with peoples that tries to make a positive change self-sustaining. They did a project a few years ago back that gave cell phones to young women in India who went to rural communities to do some eye testing, with the outcome being that the conveyance of either glasses if they had them, and it was a glass vision issue, or referrals for surgery for issues like cataracts. And this gave the women paying jobs, while in some cases freeing up a young child who was often assigned to take care of the elderly grandparent. With eyesight issues, they could now go back to school. So it was a twofer. And these younger adults being so engaged in trying to make a difference to me, I wish I had that altruism passion when I was that age. So I'm trying to play catch up now as I'm an old fart.
I love it. And a shout out to our Enactus program, back to back national champions. This year again, they've competed internationally in the world program as well. So our Enactus program is definitely something to be proud of. So I appreciate your support in that area. So looking forward as vice chair of the UW Whitewater Foundation, you've had a front row seat to the university's future and the importance of philanthropy. What excites you most about where UW Whitewater is heading?
I would say I'm proud of our university leadership and our staff on campus and at the foundation. Many listeners know our niches where we excel in business and teaching, but we also have very innovative affiliations in nursing and engineering through our UROC campus, a new major in artificial intelligence, and programs that tap into high schools to give college credit and a path for a degree that is less costly and probably faster than traditional means. So we are not the institution many of us experienced when we came here. We've evolved, and I guess I would encourage all the listeners to see how young adults continue to come of age in Whitewater. And the other thing that my employer used to tell me when they would go out and seek interns for summer is that we can try to get grads from other institutions, the bigger institutions in the Midwest, names everybody has heard of, but the fact that Whitewater students more often stay in the Great Lakes area pays dividends for our economic development in the communities we're in. And I think that was a nod and why Johnson, anyway, hired more Whitewater interns than other schools because they had hoped to make them full-time employees, and the Whitewater students on balance are more likely to stay. So I think John Buckley tapped into our capital campaign in your first podcast, but with John and Wendy's leadership and the help from the foundation staff, people like yourself, Dane, and other major gift officers, and donors like those listening in on this podcast, there's just so many positive things happening. And it gets back to, we talked about return on time earlier, but there's also return on investment. And you can give money to bigger schools that are more costly, but Whitewater, a donation to Whitewater, I think, is something that goes a long way, and the value of the education we give out is second to none in the state, in my mind.
I agree, and in my position here as a senior gift officer and the relationships that I've already built and being able to see generous donors and alums like yourself is what it's all about, and it's why we do what we do, and being able to pay it back, and seeing the generosity that happens here at the institution and the difference that our alums and donors make in the lives of our students is so rewarding. So thank you for everything. Thank you for sharing your story, your perspective, your continued commitment to UW Whitewater. Your leadership, your curiosity, and generosity are creating opportunities that will impact students and future generations of Warhawks for years to come. To our listeners, thank you for joining us for another episode of Legacy and Leadership. If today's conversation inspired you, we encourage you to stay connected, stay curious, and continue investing in the communities and people that help shape your journey. I'm Dane Walkington. We'll see you next time on Legacy and Leadership.